Hello, BookTube Mishbucha. It's Courtney, America's Jewish mother, and I am here today to film my Friday Reads video. So this past week I read or finished 4 books, and I'm currently reading 2 books, so I want to tell you about them. So the first book I finished this past week was Thomas Hardy's The Mayor of Casterbridge. I spoke very highly of this in my last Friday Reads video, and it did not disappoint me. I really liked this book. I found the plot of it, this book was originally serialized when it came out. I think it was fully published in, I think, 1886 or something like that, but it came out in installments like a lot of Charles Dickens novels did too, and so for that reason it felt sort of Dickensian in nature to me, and I use that not in the sort of bad connotation that usually has with it, but just in the sense that it came out in all these installments, and so there was a lot of action that happened, and a number of sort of chapters that ended in like cliffhanger kind of things, and stuff like that. So yeah, there was a lot that happened in this book. It was a little slow going at the start, I will say, so probably for about the first maybe 100 pages or so. There were a lot of descriptions of pastoral scenes, so lengthy descriptions of buildings, descriptions of nature and fields and trees and flowers and stuff like that. But once it kind of settled into the actual plot of the novel, there was less of that as it went on, and I found it really enjoyable. So I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. I liked not only kind of the action-packed nature of it once you got a good ways in, but I really liked the central question around which this book revolves, which is, can you fundamentally change your character? Because the main character in this novel, Michael Henchard, establishes himself at the beginning of the book as basically a thoughtless jerk. But then, the novel flashes forward to a number of years later, 17, 18 years later, and he seems to be sort of sincerely remorseful for his previous behavior, and he seems to have turned over a new leaf. But really the question that the novel keeps kind of coming back to is that really the case? Has he actually changed, or does he just kind of have this external appearance of someone who's changed? And what I really think this book does a good job of showing is that our character as human beings is revealed not only by how we act when things are going our way, but possibly even more so, our character is revealed through how we act when things are not going our way and things are happening that we don't want to happen. And Hardy seems to believe that that's really when the true nature of our character is revealed, and so that happens to Michael Henchard a number of times throughout the novel. And based on how he reacts, we get a sense of what his character really is. And it's also sort of compared with his friend slash frenemy slash rival, Donald Farfrae, who also goes through both trials but also successes. And we see how he reacts to those things. We also see how Michael Henchard's daughter, Elizabeth Jane, reacts to trials and tribulations, but also good stuff. So through all 3 of these characters, really, we get a sense of what all of their baseline characters are, and how they tend to not really change in moments of turbulation. So yeah, I really liked this book. I thought it was great. If you're willing to kind of wait a little bit to get to the action, I think it's definitely worth it. I do think he probably tries to do too much and pack a little too much in there, which I'm sure is probably the result of this having originally been published in installments. But yeah, otherwise I thought it was really good. 4.5 stars. I would totally recommend it if you are interested in questions of human nature and whether you know, a tiger can really change its stripes, so to speak. And also, if you like Dickens, I would recommend it too. So, the next book I finished in the past week was my buddy read of Richard Wright's Native Son, which I was doing with Lindsay, of Lindsay's Book Life. Yeah, this was really good. The buddy read, 5 stars. I always enjoy reading with Lindsay and hearing what she has to say about stuff, because even though we both were in the same graduate program and there was some overlap in the areas which we studied, we still seem to come to a book with different takes on things a lot of times. So I enjoy hearing what, you know, she particularly thought was interesting, or what stood out to her. And I like hearing her thoughts. So 5-star buddy read. This book for me was a 4-star read. I really liked it. I would definitely recommend it. I think it does a great job of showing Richard Wright's sort of philosophy of naturalism. So naturalism is basically a literary movement that kind of shows that a person's environment, or a character's environment, has a direct impact on their actions and behavior and character. And a lot of times in naturalistic stories, a person's destiny or outcome is kind of predetermined and shaped by their environment. And once they've been in that environment, even if they remove themselves from it or attempt to, their fate is kind of already sealed. And that's definitely what happens to Bigger Thomas in this novel. He has been shaped by living in a poor section of Chicago, a poor and segregated, I should say, section of Chicago, in squalor and filth. He has been raised to basically be afraid and hate. And that basically shapes his character from the very beginning, and we see how that plays out over the course of the book. And yeah, and Wright also in this edition has an essay that's included at the end of the text called How Bigger Was Born. I highly recommend that, because I think it is so timely in thinking about the rise of things like white nationalism in contemporary American society. And you might think, wait, what? but Wright actually talks about in the essay how, even though he had observed a lot of Bigger Thomas type characters who were African American, he also saw that Bigger as a type does not have to be black. There are white versions of him, and I think, again, the sort of white nationalist politics we've seen in the contemporary United States is a good example of these white Bigger Thomases at play. So yeah, definitely recommend this. It's not the easiest read, because Wright has sort of purposefully written this book in such a way that he does not want you to be able to cry over it. And he talks about that in the How Bigger Was Born essay, and how when he published his collection of short stories, Uncle Tom's Children, that he saw sort of the mistake he had made in writing a book that, you know, like a rich white woman would be able to weep over and feel better about herself. And so he had determined that whenever he wrote something following that, he would write it so that you would not have the comfort of tears and crying and sentimentality. And Bigger Thomas is not a nice character. He is not heroic. He is really not very sympathetic, and he gets very little redemption. He does get a little bit, but it's very little toward the end of the book. And yeah, Wright wrote him that way on purpose. He's not supposed to be sympathetic. He's supposed to be a warning and a symbol. And I think Wright does an excellent job of that. So 4 stars, highly recommend. The next book I finished in the past week was a poetry collection from my birthday book haul. This is Rose McLarney's Forage. I liked this pretty well. I think I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. There's a lot of nature and eco-poetry in this volume, but there's also a sort of undercurrent of social commentary that she infuses into some of the poems that she writes, and I kind of wish that social commentary was a little bit more forthcoming and prominent throughout the volume, because I think if you are someone who just reads poetry casually and for fun, it would be easy to miss in a lot of instances. And so I kind of wish that that particular thread was a little bit more forthright, or that she had just eliminated it entirely and just stuck to writing about nature and eco-poetry, since I think that's really where her true passion lies. I will read you one poem from here that I thought was particularly good, if I can find it. Okay. Alright, this is called Fresh Tracks, and it starts with a quotation, or a definition. Coy wolf. New dog, coyote, wolf hybrid, already numbers in the millions. Out of coyote and wolf crossed, out of coyote's compromises about where to live, what to hunt, out of wolf's big bones, bearing wolf's bulk, fed by wolf's broad jaw, wolf's bite. Out of dog, out of willingness to mate with dog, out of tameness turned, away from coyness, out of coyness. Into clamor, crashes of cars and construction, into noise no longer weapon against the wild, into crowds, into cities not creeping, holding full tail high, nose proudly low for the trails to where fat suburban rabbits go. Into the unheralded heavens of highway sides, into the unclaimed kingdoms of park corners, into habitats we create that cannot shelter us, the tender furless. Following graveyards green, beckoning glows from burrow to burrow, each generation gorged on garbage grows. From earth when we can no longer endure or be endured, from cold forests cut and no more, from trees, from all we've made fall like the trees. Following timber, following trade routes, following trains arriving by railroad, as once to the west another civilization. Out of survival, out of desire for it, out of dogs past being pets and the doggedness with which life persists despite the end of one form, out of the fresh tracks life lays, over the ways of we who will not scavenge, so cannot be saved, street crossing, sidewalking, coy wolves, not coy, they come. So I really enjoyed the alliteration of sounds in that particular poem. There were a lot of C words and G words. So you hopefully you got a sense of, as I was reading that, the alliterative uses of language that she is somewhat exploring in that poem. So that was probably my favorite poem in the collection, and it's probably not as representative of the other poems, but it was my favorite. But yeah, lots of nature and eco poetry in here, with, like I said, a sort of undercurrent of social commentary, but you have to kind of pay attention to catch it. 3.5 stars. So the next book I finished was Arundhati Roy's The God of Small Things. Y'all, I really did not like this book, and I pretty much did not like it from the first chapter. And so I basically just hate read it. But I wanted to finish it because I wanted to be able to give it a fair star rating. So I ended up giving this 2 stars. I've heard some people say that the subsequent novel that she's published that came out a few years ago called The Ministry of Utmost Happiness or something like that. I've heard some people say that even though they did not like this one or did not connect with that one, that her latest novel is, they liked it a lot more, but I'll probably be really hesitant to read anything by her for a while. I may try the other one at some point, but it's definitely going to be a while. So here's the thing about this book. Nothing really happens in it. And you know, that's not always a bad thing. I feel like Marilynne Robinson's Gilead is another book in which you don't really have a lot of plot that occurs, but it's like such a rich character study and development of the character of John Ames. And it asks all these really important questions, and I feel like this just doesn't do that. And so for a book where you don't have a lot of plot, to also not have really rich character development, I mean, for me, that's pretty much something you can't come back from. And I understand what she's doing. She's saying that in this title, The God of Small Things, that we tend to focus on small things and leave the big things unsaid. And I get that, and I get that that's what she's basically trying to do in this novel, but, like, no one wants to read about, nothing happening. You can't just table, like, basically almost the entire plot of your book for the last 40 to 50 pages of it. I mean, like, really only 2 things of note happen in this book for the first 80% of it. And because most of the perspective that we get here is channeled through Esta and Rahel, who are these twins, and their children, they're, what, 7, 8, 9, something like that. They don't have the perspective or the reflective capabilities that an adult narrator would. And, there's just too much work that you have to do for so little payoff. So the timeline jumps back and forth a lot. You have to try to figure out what's going on through the perspective of a child who's not able to process things the way an adult would, or reflect on them in the way an adult would. And then almost nothing happens for 80% of it. And there's no character development, like I said. So I just felt like this book was way too much work for too little payoff. And I'm giving it 2 stars instead of 1 because I appreciate that she's trying to make some kind of commentary on the fact that the family in this novel who are from India have clearly internalized colonialist attitudes, and are these Anglophiles, and how that sort of shaped their lives and identities and understanding of themselves in a negative way. And I appreciate that commentary, but otherwise, I just did not feel like there was much that was enjoyable about this book, including the writing. Now, occasionally I would come across a sentence that I was like, okay, well, that's actually kind of insightful, but they were so few and far between, you guys. So yeah, I wouldn't, but again, don't totally take my word for it, because some people read this and really liked it, and connected with it, and I looked at the reviews on Goodreads, and there are a ton of 5-star reviews and 1-star reviews, so I think it's very polarizing, and you either connect with the style or you don't. So, if you haven't read this book and you're interested in it, maybe just read the first chapter, and if you're not feeling it, you're probably not going to connect with it. And there were a number of times that I really wanted to DNF this, but again, I wanted to finish it just so I can give it a fair star rating on Goodreads. So, 2 stars, probably will not read another thing by her for a while. Alright, so those were all the books I finished this week. Now on to the books that I am currently reading. So I just today started James Baldwin's Notes of a Native Son. So this is on my June TBR. And I thought, well, I thought yesterday when I finished The God of Small Things, I was like, well, I still have 3 full days of May left. I might just try to put Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich, because it's a novella and it's only about 100 pages. I might just try to put that into the end of May, but I don't know. I just wasn't feeling it to start it yesterday, and I was like, you know what? I'm excited about starting James Baldwin. So why would I deny myself the pleasure of reading James Baldwin just because it's on my June TBR? So whatever, I started it today. I probably won't finish it to make it into my May wrap-up, but that's fine, whatever. So yeah, Notes of a Native Son is an essay collection that he published in 1955. It focuses on a variety of topics, but it also speaks somewhat to Richard Wright's novel Native Son, which is why I thought this would be a good time to read it, since I just recently finished a reread of Native Son. So yes, this is going well so far, and I'm enjoying it. James Baldwin continues to be very insightful and sharp on issues that are still relevant and going on today. And then the other book that I'm still reading that I'll probably finish today or tomorrow is Norman Rosenthal's book, The Gift of Adversity. So this is a nonfiction book. Basically, he sort of tells and he's a psychiatrist by profession, so he basically tells a lot of stories from his life in order to make various points about adversity and about how we can use that to help us grow and use it as an opportunity instead of seeing it as like, oh, we're the victim of something. And the chapters tend to be really short. A lot of them are only like 5 or 6 pages long, and he puts a little moral at the end of each of them, like in Aesop's fable kind of fashion. So I'll save my more descriptive thoughts about this for my May wrap-up video, but I'll probably finish this today or tomorrow. So those are the books that I have finished and or am currently reading. I would love to hear what y'all have been reading lately. Please let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of the books that I mentioned and have thoughts on them, either agreeing thoughts or conflicting thoughts. Please let me know down in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. So I hope everyone is staying healthy and well, and I hope that whatever you are reading, it is good and you are enjoying it. And until next time, would it kill you to call your mother?